logged back into my remote host. And now it's time to start taking a look around and figuring out what's going on this server. And I'm going to do this from the standpoint of you've probably never done this before, so I'm going to start at the very beginning. The first thing you generally want to find out is where you are right now. So you are somewhere on the hard drive system. You're used to Windows probably, and on Windows it's going to put you in a user folder. The same is true on a Mac. If you fire up a terminal on the Mac, you're going to get put into your user folder. And the same is true of Linux. We're going to get put into a user folder. Now, in this case, we're in kind of a strange place. We logged in as root, which is a strange account to have on an Ubuntu Linux box. If we were using Fedora or CentOS or Red Hat, this would be a little more natural. Root is an actual user on those systems, but it's generally not on Ubuntu. If we want to use privileged commands on Ubuntu, we usually use that sudo command that we took a look at earlier. Nevertheless, we do still have a root folder. Let's find out where we are on the hard drive. We know we're in the root folder, but we don't really know where that is. Let's type in pwd, and that's short for present working directory. This shows you where you are right now. It's kind of like that sign at the mall that says you are here. Okay, so it tells us that we are in /root. So / is the very top of the hard drive. It would be the equivalent of a C drive on a PC. And then one folder under that, root. So now we know where we are. Let's see what's here. Let's see if there are any files or folders in this particular directory. And by the way, I'll be using directory and folder fairly interchangeably. Let's type in ls. You can remember this as list. We're doing a list of files and folders, ls. By itself, we'll just hit enter, and there's nothing here. This isn't usually the case for most folders, especially the ones that we're going to be looking at a little bit later. So why don't we move into a folder where there's actually things to look at? To change directory, you type in cd. cd for change directory. Let's do / and then let's type in etc. This is one of those funny special directories in Linux, and it even has a funny special name. We call this folder etc. Yes, like the craft site, but it's not the same thing. cd / etc. So if we go into etc, we can see we're in etc because of our command prompt. It changes. It gives you a notice of where you are, so that's kind of handy. So now let's try that ls command again. If we type in ls and press enter, we see there's quite a bit here. Now I'm going to give you a bit of a trick for the Windows people out there. This is kind of hard to read. So the default color on PowerShell is a dark blue background, and then we've got all of this blue text on it. So it's really hard to see. It's really hard to read, and I'm kind of worried that it might not show up all that well in the video. So I'm going to do a little razzle-dazzle here. I'm going to right-click up here at the top bar. I'm going to come down to Properties. I'm going to go to the Colors tab. I'm going to make sure Screen Background is selected. And we don't want screen text. We don't want it like that. We want the screen background, and we want to change the color to something else. I'm going to change it to black, which is going to make it look like a normal CMD command window. I'll click OK, and now that's a little easier to read. It's not perfect. Maybe a dark gray would work a little bit better. Use whichever color works best for you. The ls command gave us a list of files, but it's not a very useful list, is it? There's no details on the files, how big they are, when they were created, anything like that. So let's look at something with a little bit more detail. And in order to pull this off, we're going to use something called a command line argument. This doesn't mean you're going to get into a fight with your computer. Instead, what it means is you're going to pass some extra command switches. Let's do ls dash. The dash is the clue that we're looking for here. This tells us that we are going to be passing in some command line arguments, also called command line switches. And this can change the way that the command actually works. So let's try this, ls-l, and now I can see more details. So it's a detailed list of files, ls-l. And I can see the name of the folder or file. The folders, by the way, are the ones that are in blue, and the files are the ones that are in white. I can see the creation dates. I can see how big the file is. I can see who owns it, so all of that is root. That's the only thing on here right now. Later on, we'll create other files with different owners. But for now, everything is root. And then that weird thing off to the side with all the D's and R's and W's and X's, those are file permissions. So those determine whether or not a file can be read, written to, if it's read-only, can it be executed. There's a lot of things in the permissions, and that's what that column is telling you. Earlier, when we were talking about SSH keys, we learned that there are hidden files on a Linux system, and we learned that those are denoted by a dot. So the name of the folder or file will start with a dot. If that's the case, then it's going to be hidden. And those hidden files are not going to be in the command we just executed. So why don't we try this? Let's do ls-a. You can remember this by show me all files, even the hidden ones. ls-a gets us the original list that we saw, but this time we actually see more stuff. There's the .pwd lock file in the top of the list, for example. That's a hidden folder, or file rather, that you wouldn't see unless you specified the A switch option. That's pretty cool, right? But what if you wanted both of those things to work at the same time? You wanted to do ls-a and ls-l. You can actually stack your command line switches. So let's try that. ls-al. And now we're going to get the hidden folders, but we're going to get the detailed list as well. Let's try it again. Hit the up arrow on your keyboard, and that brings back the latest command that you just typed. In fact, you can keep hitting the up arrow, and you can see all the commands that you've typed so far. If you go up a ways and you want to go back down, you can use your down arrow to go backwards. And that's a huge time saver. But what I wanted to show you is the order doesn't matter. So let's do LA this time, and we're going to get the same thing. So the order of the command line switches doesn't matter. Let's take a look at one more magic trick. I'm going to show you how to view the sizes in something called human readable format. So right now they're just raw numbers. This whole column here is just raw numbers in bytes, and that isn't always easy to read. Now these files are all pretty small, so we don't really have too much trouble reading these. Let's do ls-l, which we've covered already. That gives us the detailed list. But let's add the H switch onto the end this time and see what we get different. All right, so this time we can see, instead of the raw numbers, we can see a rounded number, 2 digits, and then K after it if anything is bigger than 1,000 bytes. And actually, if we had bigger files in megabytes, we would see an M. You may even run into a few files that are gigabytes with a G. That's really as big as they're going to get, but this is a lot easier to read, and it gives you a rough idea of how many bytes are actually in here, but instead of trying to visually add commas or dots in there depending on what part of the world you're in, to get it separated out into something we can read, this does a great job. So let's wrap this up with one last thing that I'll show you. We've only scratched the surface. There are a lot more command switches that you can use. And you may be asking yourself, how can I find out what those command line switches are and how to use them? Most commands in Linux have a help switch on them. And so far, all of our switches have been one letter. There's another way to specify this, so let's take a look at this option. Let's do ls. This one is going to be --, 2 dashes, not just one, and then an actual word. So if you have a single dash, it's going to be a single character for each switch. But if you want a longer one, --, is going to be what you're going to use. So this does ls-help. This is going to give us all of the command line information that we could possibly want to know about all the switches that are available and what they do. There is one other way that we can generally get to this information. Let me scroll down to the bottom of this. And that's with the man command. So if I type in man ls, and no, ladies, this does not have anything to do with how sexist Linux is. Man is short for manual, so it's going to give us the manual entry for the command or the piece of software that we want to look at. Pretty much all executable files in Linux have a man page associated with them. Let's take a look at this one. I'll hit enter, and now I can see the manual page for this, and I can scroll up and down with my arrow keys. And if you look at the bottom, you can see there are instructions on how to quit. So this is a little bit easier to read than the help option. If you just need to look something up quickly, I'd use the help option. If you really wanted to get in here and find out everything that it can do, I would use this one because it's easier to read. To get out of it, just follow the instructions at the bottom of the screen and press Q to quit, and it'll take you back to where you were. So now we know where we are, how to move somewhere else, and we know how to check what files are in the folder that we're currently sitting in. And then we also learned how to get help. I'd say we're well on our way. If you found value in this video, if you learned something new, help me out with a like and subscribe. For more videos on software development and DevOps from a developer's perspective, check us out at maddevskills.com or on Twitter @devskills.